be discussing when uncertainty becomes stress. Paul, if you'd
Mm,
like, please go ahead and introduce yourself and
sure.
tell us about yourself.
I am a positivity psychologist, which is a little different term for some folks. They know psychologist, and I spent the first part of my career, about 15 years, in traditional psychotherapy. And then I made a big transition about halfway through my career to positive psychology, which is what I practice exclusively now. And really, Simon, all of the same principles apply that I was using in my clinical practice. But if you think of your mental health on a spectrum or a continuum, clear over on the left end is the sick end. That's where we have diagnosis, pathology, all that fun stuff. I'm really more passionate about the other end of that. And to understand that, if we go to the middle first, that's health, meaning not sick, right? You'd think health is the opposite of sick. But you could be sick in bed with a fever, throwing up. There comes a time you can get out of bed and you're not sick. That's what I'm labeling as health. But just getting out of bed doesn't mean that you're truly fit, thriving, prospering. That's over here on the other end. And that applies in our health, obviously, but also in our mental health, our relationships, our psychology, everything that our mind affects falls on that spectrum somewhere. So basically, I've moved my practice from here, where I
Hmm.
was for the first part of my career, over to this end. And there's some overlap in the middle. Okay.
Right.
Everybody's got issues. Have you noticed?
Oh, yes.
So, my job now is to help illuminate principles to people that help them to move along that continuum and ideally to the thriving end so that we can create and live a life that we love.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm Simon Salt. I write at The Quiet Transition, and I'm an educator for men, understanding the menopause transition, how they can support the women in their lives, both personal and professional. So I wanted to kick off our conversation with a question for you.
Okay.
What is the biggest misconception about stress?
You know what popped into my mind immediately is stress is bad. I'm going to call that a misconception.
Okay.
And the reason that came up for me is that our brain has two main jobs. Okay, your brain does a lot of things, but if it's got two main jobs, one of those is to keep you safe,
Hmm.
and the other one is to prove you right. And both of those get in our way all the time. That's probably going to come back up. But to keep us safe, our brain constantly has to be on the lookout for danger, threat, something that might suggest that we're not safe. And then its job is to trigger chemicals into the bloodstream. Okay, chemicals like adrenaline, for example, or cortisol, or there's a whole pharmacy of chemicals that your brain can trigger that are naturally produced in your body. And those chemicals put our body into what we call the fight or flight response.
Right.
And it's just your brain trying to take care of you, trying to keep you safe, right? But when that becomes a more chronic condition, if we experience that fight or flight response over time, that's what we traditionally associate with stress. That this natural protective response of our body sometimes can get in our way because it becomes prolonged and it has some detrimental effects. And that's why the misconception is stress is bad. Well, it's kind of bad for you long term if you don't address it properly.
Hmm.
But the stress or the way our body responds to a perceived threat is just a natural thing that's built in. And sometimes it'll become chronic and it requires some intentional steps toward addressing it, or maintenance, or relearning or reprogramming something that's triggering this chronic state of protection that our brain is naturally designed to do.
So you talked about then about safe. You use that word safe. I want to
Right.
come back to that.
Mhm.
What does safe look like on an average day for a person when we go through, as you said, we go through these stressors throughout the day? I mean, everybody's exposed to stressors.
Yeah.
Um, what does what does safe look like?
It's all about perception.
Okay.
Perception is all we have. So let me give you an example, because you could be sitting in a movie theater and experiencing stress, okay, or danger, or fight or flight. You feel your heart beating a little faster, or your breathing gets a little shallow and rapid, right? Or you feel that chemical infusion into your body from a movie. Are you in danger? No. You paid $12 for the show. You got your popcorn. You haven't even finished your drink yet. You're perfectly safe, but there's mechanisms built into your brain. It's a very primitive part of your brain. I'm pointing down here because it's down at the base of your brain, near the brain stem. It's a family of structures called the limbic system, which is responsible for this job of keeping you safe. And it's in the dark down there. It doesn't know what's actually going on. All it has is whatever you're bringing in through your senses. And that's why a movie can trigger a fight or flight response, even though you're really not in danger. You'll experience the same feeling if you're being attacked by a lion,
Right.
or if you're driving your car off of a cliff. You're going to experience, and the car off the cliff, I mean, you get the same feeling there as you would on a roller coaster.
Right.
But we interpret it very differently. Our body, physiologically, we're experiencing the same thing. And so anything that you perceive is what matters the most. And this is where I know you and I had a conversation earlier about, what does this have to do with stages of life, like menopause and the transitions that we go through. Any change has the potential of triggering that threat response where we don't think we're safe,
Mm.
because, oh, this isn't what I'm used to, right? And our brain will identify that, because the survival mechanism requires that we be vigilant about things that are different or unexpected or not the way we're used to. So we'll get into this response even if we're not in danger.
Right.
So, back to your question when you ask, well, what does safety look like? That is completely dependent on our perception, which is shaped by our history, our culture, our experience, our training and programming.
Okay.
And fortunately, though, that can be changed. You can
Okay.
reprogram.
So we can redefine what safe means for ourselves with
Yeah.
the right help. Okay. Okay. So one of the things that has come up in conversations that I've had, specifically with therapists and also with people going through the lived experience of the menopause transition, one of the things that they all bring back is this concept of uncertainty. And
Mm,
you hit on a little bit there where you
yeah.
talked about change, and this isn't what
Mhm.
I'm used to.
Right.
So, what makes uncertainty stressful? Why do we respond in that way to uncertainty?
I believe, Simon, that is developmental, and it's part of that survival mechanism that's built into us. When you think about it, it's safer, and I'm not saying in reality, I'm saying at least statistically speaking, okay? It's safer to assume danger and risk and be wrong than it is to assume safety and be wrong.
Right.
The stakes go up, right? um, and and that's one of the hurdles we get to overcome, because that innate survival mechanism inside of us might be telling us, oh, different is bad, right? Because I don't know how to predict that, the uncertainty that you mentioned. I don't know how to predict this, so I'm safer predicting that it's dangerous,
Right.
even though it may not be.
So how
So,
does that express? I mean, how do people express that? Because you talked about fight or flight, and
mhm,
that's the overarching response that we're going to
right.
have. That's what the brain is triggering us. And as you said, it can't tell the difference between a changing in your relationship and being attacked by a lion. It triggers the same fight or flight response. But how is
Yeah.
that? How do people express that in terms of fight or flight when they're in a relationship?
There's an old saying that goes, hurt people hurt people,
Hmm. Heard that.
which makes sense. Part of our fight or flight response, the fight part, is that if I'm in danger, I need to get aggressive. And usually, when people feel threatened, like in a relationship, they start to show up in ways that actually make the relationship worse. Accusing or assuming ill intent, or concluding that things are going downhill fast, when really it may simply be that someone's going through a life transition of some kind, or they're dealing with some hurt of their own that is now emerging as an aggressive, almost a fighting response, or flight. Some people withdraw, they pull back, they close off. And it's still part of the same response, but that's usually how that will manifest. And when I said hurt people,
Hmm.
I'm even remembering when I was 5. I'm a little kindergartner, and there was this stray cat in our yard. And I'm going to defend this house, right? I'm this mighty kindergartner. And so I go out there with a stick. I found a stick out there in the yard, and I'm chasing that cat. Yeah, you cat, get out of here. And I got it cornered between 2 tomato cages over on the south side of the house. And I'm towering over this cat with this stick. Well, this poor little cat, it's somebody's kitty. It's a little pet, right? But when it's threatened, I mean, it's got its claws out and it's hissing at me, and it jumped on me and bit my leg. And I still have a scar to this day from when I was 5. And that was really seared into my memory, partially because of the pain. But it really taught me very directly that when someone or something is feeling threatened or harmed or in danger, it brings out a side that is not typical. I'm sure that behavior was not typical of this little kitty's behavior, right? But it bit my leg in a way that left a scar permanently. And I don't know, that just comes to my mind because you see all the time people treating each other terribly because of their own hurt, their own injury, their own threat that they're experiencing. And threat is always perceived, whether
Hmm.
it's real or not, it still triggers that same response.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess you were talking about a physical scar, but also a psychological scar in
Oh, it left a
terms of,
mark. Yeah,
yeah, it left a mark on both internally and externally. Yeah,
right.
absolutely. So, I mean, stress, especially in men, because I communicate
Mm,
a lot with men,
right.
stress is not always obvious with men. So why do you think we miss the signs of it?
I think we make an error a lot of times. And maybe this is culturally driven. Maybe there's some reasons why, in our development, we've adopted this. But there's a misconception that showing it or expressing it or dealing with it directly is some kind of a sign of weakness,
Hmm.
or that there's something wrong with me. And I don't want to reveal that. I joke sometimes, Simon, that unfortunately the term psychotherapy sounds a little like therapy for psychos. And I think that's so unfortunate because of the powerful principles that are available through therapy, or what I do now is coaching, after that transition to positive psychology. Really, we're applying the same principles to help people address these things in ways that are healthy and that don't, when you bottle things up or you don't address them, it's kind of like a pressure cooker. It builds up over time, or it can come out in ways that are not so adaptive. I did a rotation at the prison as part of my early training in psychology. And there were so many examples of people who had ignored something to a point where it came out in ways that caused a restriction on their freedom eventually. You hear of crimes of passion, or people doing things that they wouldn't typically do. But going back to the brain science, this is interesting because different parts of your brain do different things. And we were talking earlier about that limbic system
Hmm.
response, the protective part of your brain. We've got brain scan studies that prove this. When that part of your brain is active, there's actually a decrease in blood flow to the frontal and prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain that's responsible for logic, reason, problem solving, and also higher cortical functions like compassion and empathy. That's more in these areas, and those aren't necessary for survival. Those are higher level functions. So when the safety part of your brain takes over, going back to the prison, there were several guys that said, "Oh, doc, I don't know what I was thinking." And I'm like, "You weren't. That's the point." Right?
Right.
No, you didn't have that part of your brain engaged. So as we learn a little bit more about how to operate the equipment, it puts us in a position where we can start to address those things a little differently. And having a place, and this is why I love what you're doing, Simon, because you're creating a forum where we can talk about it.
Hmm.
And if we can talk about it, we can think about it. And if we can think about it, we can come up with some different options
Right.
and create some new possibilities. Hopefully, that will save lives and relationships.
Yeah, definitely. My focus is trying to save those relationships. Um,
Right.
yeah, just trying to bring, especially men, into the conversation around this transition. As we talked about, uncertainty is very stressful, and I think
Yeah.
prolonged uncertainty. What did you what's your thoughts on that? Because the menopause transition is not something that's over and done within a few minutes. It
No.
is something that lasts a decade, at least, for some people.
Even as you're asking the question, Simon, I'm having a thought that maybe it's not the uncertainty so much as our chosen prediction
Hmm.
that causes the stress. Because think about it. If you were not certain what gift I'm going to present to you on your next birthday, does that cause you stress? No, because your prediction is, oh, a gift, right? I mean, you create a prediction about that it's going to be good. It's
Hmm.
going to be better. Now, usually when we think about uncertainty and it's coupled with anxiety, it's because we're predicting, oh, it's going to be worse. And we'll say, I don't know what this is going to do to our relationship. But really, what we're saying is, I think it's going to hurt our relationship.
Hmm.
It's going to make it worse. You look at menopause, and the physiological changes that happen, and the prediction of, oh, that's going to mean, and then whatever, whether
Right.
it's hormonal reactions to things, or sexual side effects, or health related issues that come up. It's a reminder that, and spoiler alert, nobody gets out of this alive. Okay. You okay, Simon? You good? We have this mortality that we're reminded of.
Right.
And we predict, oh, aging and pain and disease and death, right? Which we think is a bad thing.
Hmm.
And so that's where my brain went just then. It's not the uncertainty so much as the predictions that we make. And sometimes those are subconscious. We're not even really aware that we're making those predictions. But it's evidenced by how we feel. And if we feel anxious, we're predicting worse things to come.
Right. And I think that definitely happens in relationships that I've discussed with people. And you're right, it is a prediction. It is this sense that maybe this is it. This is what our relationship is going to be like for the next 2, 3 decades. And I think that causes people to spiral.
Yeah. And they know at some level it can't stay exactly like this.
Right.
So probably it's just going to keep getting worse. I
Yeah.
mean, that was the prediction, right?
Yeah.
You don't know that. See, the uncertainty by definition means that you don't know. Part of my job is to illuminate the obvious, which is fun because I get paid to tell people things they already know. But there's obvious things that are unnoticed. And what we're talking about right now is in that realm. It's obvious maybe when I bring it to your attention, but unnoticed up until that point. Kind of like the feeling of your shirt. Can you feel it right
Hmm.
now on your body? Now you
Yeah,
can,
because you pointed it out.
but you didn't notice it before. It's obvious now, unnoticed until I pointed it out. And much of our psychology is in that space. Awareness precedes choice. And this is the good news, okay? When you become aware, oh, I'm predicting that things are going to get worse in this relationship. That's going to cause a certain emotional reaction in me. Because if I were predicting that things are going to get better, because you have other people who are like, well, it can only go up from here. You don't know. But the thing about a relationship getting better, think about this. It doesn't just happen spontaneously.
Right.
It requires work,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Anybody that's been in a relationship for any length of time at all knows it requires some maintenance, some work.
Yeah.
Yeah, no surprises. So does your car. So does your health,
Right.
right? If you ignore those things, they tend to go downhill. But given the right principles and the application of those, can you improve this relationship? In the context of whatever's going on. It could be menopause, it could be a chronic disease, it could be disability. And eventually it's going to be death.
Right.
And I don't say that to be morbid, I say that to acknowledge
Right.
the reality of our mortality. And death isn't a bad thing, it's just a predictable thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting that you bring it back to that. I mean, I'm familiar with the term cognitive dissonance, so we're talking about
Mm.
those distortions like fortune telling
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that we do predict things within our
Yeah.
own life. We also predict things, as you said, within our relationship. And I think maybe that's why people get to a point in their relationship where they're at that stage of this is it. This is as good as it's going to be, or this is how it's going to be, especially when they hit this transition point in their life stage where their partner appears to change.
Mm-hmm.
They are changing, but not necessarily in the way that their male partner thinks they're changing. It's not a new
Yeah.
person. They haven't become a new personality. It's just a change. And I think
Right.
that really comes back to what you're saying, this prediction mode that we get into of saying, well, this is how it's going to be, or it's only going to get worse from here because that's our expectation. Yeah.
When we see it as a prediction
Hmm.
and not a reflection of reality, because we don't know what's coming. I
Hmm.
mean, how are you doing next week?
Right.
You don't know. But you've got guesses, you've got predictions, you've even got something to do with it, which is probably the most important part of this. You've got something to do with it.
Hmm.
When I teach the positivity model, which is the thing that I'm most known for right now, it's basically, you hear it all the time, just think positive, which can be annoying. But when we understand the psychology behind it, and I'll just show you a little visual of what this model looks like. There are two processes that our brain is constantly doing: evaluation, which means judgment of what it is, the way it is, without changing anything. We're constantly judging ourselves, kind of
Hmm.
harshly sometimes, right?
Hmm. Yep.
Our spouse, our relationship, the economy, the government, the weather, constantly judging. And we're also constantly creating what is to be. But put that on hold for just a minute. When we're evaluating what it is, you see on this line, I've got what it is, meaning your current circumstances, the way it is right now without changing anything. You're judging it, and judgment or evaluation implies comparison with some standard.
Right.
So I have to take what it is and compare it to my standard of what I think would be better or what I think would be worse. And it could always be better, right? It could always be worse too.
Hmm.
Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So these arrows represent the emotional energy. Look what happens when we take what it is and we compare it in evaluation mode. We compare it to something better. How do we feel about what we got? This sucks, right? And it really
Right.
does. I mean, compared to something better, this is awful. But what if we take what we've got and we compare it to something worse? So, if to use your topic, menopause, either me or my spouse going through menopause, it is what it is. Okay. And you might be tempted to compare that to the times when you were both in your 20s,
Hmm.
right? And you think that was better. And so you compare this to that and you're like, well, this sucks. See, that's the emotional energy around that. But notice this. Actually, let me give you a little example because just a couple of years ago, and this is a little different topic, but it's the same story, different details. All right. I get a call from my son, my oldest son, who's a brilliant engineer raising 5 of my grandkids out in Chicago. And my son tells me, Dad, I have cancer. And I'm like, cancer? What? Now, it's normal to feel whatever you're going to feel, but look what's happening psychologically. It is what it is. My son has cancer. What do I immediately compare that to? Well, not having cancer, that would be better. This sucks.
Hmm.
And it really does compared to that.
Hmm.
But also, Simon, I'm a black belt in positivity. Okay, practice it every day. I teach it all the time. And so I heard my brain say this after the initial shock, and you get to feel whatever you're going to feel, right? But I heard my brain say, oh, I'm glad it wasn't. And then my brain came up with a scenario that I thought would be worse.
Right.
And what I thought is, I'm glad it wasn't my daughter-in-law calling me and
Right.
telling me that my son was just killed in a car accident.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that seems weird, maybe, but look how I would feel if that were the case. I'll take this. Thank you. I, I would take this over that. And it creates a little bit of peace with what it is. So we start there, and then from there we move into creation mode. My job usually when I'm working with people who are going through transitions or dealing with the shock or the phone call or the text. And by the way, I always leave people hanging. My son's last set of scans showed no evidence of disease.
Wonderful.
Yeah, compared to what? Compared to we had a funeral last month,
Right.
right? So you're constantly doing this. You can't turn it off. Well, whatever energy you create here, you take to the creation game
Okay.
because you don't know what's going to happen. All you can do is imagine, predict, expect, and that's all mental, right? So just focusing not on the solution necessarily, but just on the emotional energy. What happens when you imagine or predict or expect that what's coming is even worse than what you already have? How do you feel?
Right. Worse.
This is anxiety. Okay, this
Right.
red arrow here, anxiety. This one is depression down on the bottom.
Right.
How do you feel when you anticipate, expect, predict that what's coming is even better than what you've already got? That is hope.
Okay.
Okay, the emotional equivalence of these arrows. This is depression. This is anxiety. And I'm a clinical psychologist. Okay, this is 30 years of clinical experience in a nutshell. This green arrow here is peace, where we make peace with what it is, no matter what it is. We make peace with it, and then we move forward and create the upgrade. This is hope.
Right.
And hope is the number one preventative factor for suicide. We know this because hopelessness is the number one risk factor.
Right.
So we're losing, far too many people, but also relationships because people don't understand what their own mind is doing with this.
Right.
And I'm not here to tell people how to think. I don't have that kind of authority. I do invite people to see that they are thinking, using this model as kind of a map to show me, okay, here's where I am. If I'm depressed or anxious, or if I'm feeling peace and hope, we can see from the model where that's coming from. And then awareness precedes choice. That's what gives us the opportunity to try something a little differently. Now, I've laid a lot of psychology on you.
No, that's been really good. And actually, I was going to ask because what it sounds like you're describing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I am not a psychologist.
That's
Um,
okay. I
but what it sounds like you're describing is a model for resilience that
Yes.
by building this different way of looking, we're able to become more resilient to what
Right.
it is.
Yes. Really, for me, that gets at the core of how I would define resilience. We think of it typically as bouncing back from or recovering from the hard things that happen. Well, it's not if hard things will happen, it's when,
Right.
right? This is
Mhm.
another welcome to earth moment. The hard stuff happens. How we evaluate it determines whether we experience peace or depression
Right.
about what it is. And from that energy, we move forward to create what's coming. And when we anticipate that it's going to be better, that's when we feel hope. And then we apply our energy toward actually creating the upgrade as opposed to getting trapped in anxiety. So, yeah, resilience. And the good news is we are designed, I think it's in our divine design as resilient beings. We heal.
Hmm.
You ever cut your finger on something? Yeah. And what happened? It healed, right? We're designed to heal. And we're also mortal because I already told you nobody gets out of this alive. So, but while we're here, while we're experiencing this life, our body, our mind, our hearts, they're designed to heal.
Right.
And if we give it the right context, our body will just heal itself. It's
So
like
would
a
you?
band-aid. You know, you put a band-aid on the cut, the band-aid doesn't heal it.
Right.
It creates a context that facilitates that healing. You know, when I've all those years in psychotherapy and now as I do positive psychology coaching, I don't heal people. They heal.
Right.
And I try to create the context that allows them to achieve that healing in their relationship or in their heart, in their mind.
So I think your model, and just as we start to wrap up, but I think your
Mhm.
model is that those choices that we make where we're on that um, chart
Mhm.
are how we can tackle or address stress without waiting for crisis.
Yeah,
This is something we can practice.
we can practice, we can train, we can learn, we can reprogram. Now, I use that word intentionally because whatever we're already programmed to do comes very naturally to us. And
Hmm.
if we want to change that up, it's not easy. Like learning a new language, for example.
Right.
That's a really great example of reprogramming because your parents already programmed you to speak a particular language.
Right.
They didn't even give you a choice, right? So, how we react, how we perceive threat, you know, we talked about that fight or flight response earlier. All of this is programmed in. So, we come by it very honestly. And the good news, we can reprogram. Bad news, it's going to take some work, some
Hmm.
repetition, some practice. And I think it starts with awareness. You know, I shared that model with you. I've got a little mini book called Portable Positivity.
Hmm.
And it's a step by step breakdown of that model. In fact, I've prepared a free gift for everyone who's listening. You can go get this, and we'll put this in the show notes too. But drpauljenkins.com, just remember my name, drpauljenkins.com, and then do a / TQT, which stands for what, Simon?
The quiet transition.
The quiet transition. This is just for
That's
listeners
awesome.
here on the
That's
Substack. So um, that'll give you the blueprint, okay, the map,
hmm
the instructions for operating the equipment. And then what you do with it after that is totally up to you. But I wanted to present that as just a gift for anyone who's listening here today.
Thank you. I really appreciate you doing that. Paul,
You're
this has
welcome.
been amazing. I really appreciate your time.
Mm.
Where can people find you?
You know, the best place to find me is go grab the book.
Right.
um, because that will present the valuable model that I've shared with you here today, but also on the website, drpauljenkins.com. Um, I'm new to Substack.
Yes.
This is my first experience doing a Substack live, but you'll find me on YouTube. I've got a podcast called Live on Purpose Radio. So there's plenty of places to find me. LinkedIn is a great place if you want me to come speak for your organization or have a professional consultation of some kind. That's probably the best place.
Perfect. And I will put all of those details in the post back about this live so everybody will be able to find you. Again,
Thank you.
Paul, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thanks
Oh,
everybody for joining us. And I hope you enjoyed this Substack Live. Thank you. Bye bye.